record this so that, because I see that not everyone is here, and that way we can record it. Hello, all of you who are not here. We love you and miss you.
Well, I have to tell you that while we were waiting, we had a wonderful discussion, and we are feeling as if we want to revolt against trope. Because
that's what we said.
there was too much. Cantor Wallman introduced us to, what is it, 3 different trope patterns? And I told everyone I was crying by the end of it.
Oh,
and
I'm so sad about that, but don't give up and don't panic. The thing about trope is a vehicle to help us tell the story. So that's how I think about trope. I'm telling the story and it's going on, and then I get to the highlight, and I want to call your attention to it. And that's how the trope works. It's a vehicle to help us to tell the story.
That was beautiful.
I think you're good to go.
Now, when we get our Torah portions, will we also get a recording of each of our?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he'll drop it onto the SoundCloud. And yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
All right, it's no problem at all. It's just the trope, and we love the trope. The trope is our friend.
The trope is our friend.
The trope is our friend.
It's kind of like learning a song. If we can just learn the sounds, I think we can get it, even if we don't know what we're saying.
I don't think we really need the theory of trope.
So you got a little overwhelmed with trope.
We got over trope.
Yeah. You're over troped. That's okay.
We're verklempt and over troped.
Oh my God. Too much trope. All right. So what happened with Malka?
She was having technical problems with her computer. She could only hear everybody through my cell phone speaker, but she couldn't hear through her computer. So we rescheduled for next week. I'm not sure whether next week was supposed to be just with you.
No,
or was supposed to be Malka and you, but we just put it off a week.
Listen, there's no supposed to be anymore. It's all
exactly.
It's a great big, as we used to say in the Army, Charlie Foxtrot.
What does that mean?
I think it means totally fucked up.
Well, I was thinking I was thinking it was FUBAR.
Yeah, FUBAR, yeah. FUBAR.
FUBAR is a good one. You say that in the Navy.
Yes, yes, all right. So, okay, all right. So Malka's having technical difficulties. We've got who we've got. It's lovely. We're all here. That's great. So yeah, next week was actually scheduled to be our last official class. And the concept was we were going to meet with Malka, and then we were going to meet with me. And it was like kind of final questions, conversation, whatever before the break. But one thing I'll say now, and I'll communicate to Malka privately, is that Malka has always made herself available through the summer to continue to work on Hebrew, because it is a perishable skill. If you don't work on a language, it's a use it or lose it kind of a skill. So Malka will make herself available throughout the summer, I'm sure, to continue to meet with people and talk. And also, if any of you want to get together to do some Hebrew study through the summer, and you would like to Zoom it, and you don't have access to Zoom, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to set up a private Zoom for any and all of you who may want to get together. So just putting
I
that
have
out.
a Zoom account and I'm happy to schedule anything. I have a Zoom
Okay,
account.
that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Leah. So you all caught up. How's everybody doing?
Good.
I'm good. About 4 people in my office got laid off today. It was very sad.
Who
Who got laid off? I missed that. Who got laid off?
4 people in my office.
Oh, Leanna.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a third of us.
Laid off or furloughed?
No, laid off. We've already done the furlough. Now it's a layoff.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was a rough day.
That's terrible.
Horrible.
So sorry.
Lots of skills, you know, it's going to be hard to ever, yeah, it's tough. It was so sad.
Really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm afraid some businesses, small businesses, are never going to reopen. They just couldn't weather the storm.
Yeah.
I mean, from shoe repair to cleaners to tailors to all people.
Yeah.
We're trying to support all of the little independent restaurants, you know, occasionally to pick up from all the places that we would like to see survive.
Did you see Governor Ducey's announcement?
Yeah.
I didn't see it. I heard secondhand, but what's the essence of it, John? What's the
essence of it is that starting on Monday, retail businesses can do, any retail business can do curbside or walk up or window, and then by next Friday they can open with social distancing.
Retail can open.
Retail can open, and he hasn't said for sure, but by the 12th he's going to open restaurants.
Did he say anything about hair salons?
No.
You can get it done on the curb, you're okay.
I would.
I just want to comment that I think everyone's hair looks fabulous.
I will schedule you an eye appointment ASAP.
In a couple of months, there will not be any more blonde.
And whatever you do, don't clean your glasses.
Yeah, don't.
I'm about ready to do one of those pixie cuts that Judi Dench did, because if I do that, I will be completely gray.
Yeah, I'm really glad I never colored my hair. So.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You're not having the trouble the rest of us are having.
And let's all discuss the nail situation.
Oh, well, the nails. I took those things off. April 3, I can't get off, but my nails are like paper, and I only put
paper thin.
I play like paper. I put them on for Rebecca's wedding because I wanted to be beautiful, and then I did it one more time, and now I'm just like Band-Aid.
That is so funny.
I know, it's stupid. Why did I do that?
Because Rebecca told you to.
Rebecca.
I'm sorry for the bad timing.
So we
Good
bought
timing,
dog
I should
clippers.
You
We
bought what?
bought dog clippers because we thought we could trim the dog, and this is what we ended up with.
OMG.
So I'm not
Show
doing
it
my
again.
own hair under any circumstances.
What was it?
Show it again.
Trimmed it.
Rachel, how are things at hospice?
You know, they're hard. We've had, at this point, about 70 patients with COVID. 95% of them have died with us.
Oh, no.
We have one 92-year-old guy who we think is actually going to make it. But yeah, it's hard. And I think people are excited to open things up, and we are too, but seeing the impact and the toll this takes, you know, I'm not in any rush by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I thought the governor was really, his presentation was really balanced. He said, we're not going to do anything that isn't called for by the health. So,
Which is great.
And he had a good graph that showed how everything has been really descending for the past like 7 days. It looks like it's plateauing. So.
Well, I think that if we have widespread testing, which is now available, we're going to have far more data to look at in the next 2 weeks. That's going to make his decision easier one way or the other.
Yeah.
Right now,
his presentation was he's going to do a test blitz over the weekend. They're going to try and do.
Well, it's the next 3 Saturdays, John, that they're going to do this testing blitz. 3 consecutive Saturdays to try to get as much information as they can.
Are there criteria people have to meet in order to be tested?
they should, according to what he said was they should, if they feel sick or they think they might have been in contact with someone who has it, but then he's going to expand it. I think this starting this weekend, so anybody can get tested.
But I think if you have a fever or any symptoms, you cannot be tested at one of these
Right.
things. You have to go
But
to.
I think there are no criterion to be tested. You just have to want to be tested. They're not going to turn
My
anybody
husband,
away 'cause they
Ron-
need the data.
Yeah, Ron was seriously ill in January before we ever heard the term COVID-19. He had the worst cold of his life with fever, with coughing, laid in bed for 5 days and just, no energy. He missed 5 days of work, which is a lot. And he thinks he may have had it. And he has just reached out to our family physician and gotten an order so he can get tested, because he's pretty convinced that he had it before it was a phenomenon that we never heard of.
We just had, my husband and I just had the antibody test because we were convinced that we had it around the beginning of March.
Uh-huh.
And so our doctor has it, but we won't know results until next week. But
Oh, wow.
The antibody test. It's the Abbott test. I'm hoping that that's the most accurate, but from what we're hearing in the news, I don't know that there's any great accurate test.
But of course, one of the things that
the reality is that.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
Well, I was just going to say, they still don't know whether having antibodies is anything other than informational.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So that's the other piece. Is it accurate and does it matter?
Right.
Yeah.
So my
Well,
brother
it
is recovering,
doesn't
which
matter.
is, my brother is recovering.
Baruch Hashem.
But
Really good.
it's now been 35 days and he still can't summon up the energy to leave his apartment, which for my brother is very weird. But what he was hoping was that now that he's had it and he had such a terrible strain of it, that he could come here and escape New York and be able to hang out with my mom, who we're also worried about, kind of thing. And then when WHO came out and said, just because you had it doesn't mean that you're not going to get it again, it was kind of like, oh no.
I think the World Health Organization announced today they have some testing in Europe of an antiviral that seems to be effective. It's early yet.
It's a vaccine?
Pardon?
It's a vaccine?
I can't, Neil, do you remember the name of it?
Is it a vaccine?
Yeah,
It's an antiviral.
an IV treatment.
That's
Not
different.
a vaccine yet, an IV treatment.
Okay.
I read that University of Arizona has 60,000 tests, and they're going to be able to use them on their staff and students, and they plan on being able to do that and open school.
Wow.
Remdesivir is the name. Right. I think that's the name of it, Remdesivir.
That's
But
the
it
one
is
that they
an IV treatment. It's not a vaccine.
Ebola, but it wasn't effective against Ebola.
Yeah, and Fauci is the one who was talking about that today.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
About that.
Well,
Now, where do we go from here?
we go to our Torah portion. Unless there's anything else anyone wants to put out for the good of the order, anything in your personal world's good and welfare that you want to share. I did put up in the chat box, hopefully you all are seeing the chat box, we have a new group that's starting tomorrow called Socialize While Distancing. So it's just a generic support group, no agenda, just show up, see other faces and talk about how you're doing, what you're doing. So hoping that's going to be a weekly event at 3:30 on Thursdays.
Oh. Calendar.
So yeah, let me pull up my calendar. I'll give you guys the Zoom link too.
Can you just email it to us, Rabbi?
I probably could, but I'm just gonna.
Was it in the highlights?
It wasn't in the highlights because it happened it was so late breaking. We planned it after the highlights went out.
You sent an email out that said exciting news, right?
Yeah. I sent it to you, and I'm trying to get the word out. Empel Chai. That's my cut and paste.
Empel.
Empel
At
Chai.
3 o'clock?
3:30. So if you want the information, send me a note. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
So, did everybody get from Joan? We have these Parsha books that you were supposed to have gotten, but Joan went into the offices. Yes, thanks, Susan, and scanned them all to you. So hopefully have them. Our Torah portion is going to be a double portion.
Oh,
so
great.
First of all, I'm hoping more. It's just more. It's abundance, John. It's good. So can somebody remind us why we have a double portion? Why are there sometimes a double portion? Ask Rebecca.
It's because sometimes we have the leap year, essentially, right?
Right. So say more. What happens in the leap?
In a leap year, because there's an extra day, they had to break up one of the days into two. But ordinarily on not a leap year, then those 2 days would be condensed into one day.
Right. So in the Hebrew calendar, we add not actually just one day, but we add a whole month. So it's not just that there's an extra day in the leap year. You have the right idea. But in the leap year, we add a whole month, which means we need 4 extra parshas in a leap year. And then in a non-leap year, we have to truncate that down so that we get through the same amount of material with 4 less weeks. So next year is 5781, when our Bnai Mitzvah will be, is a non-leap year. So it means Bahar and Bechukotai, which are the last 2 parshiot, the last 2 portions in the book of Leviticus, are going to get mashed up into one. So we're going to have two Torah portions in one. So it's Bahar and Bechukotai, beginning in the book of Leviticus, chapter 25. So what I wanted to do this evening is walk you through a little bit of an overview of what is going on in those Torah portions. So Bahar, the word Har means mountain, like Har Sinai, Mount Sinai. Har is a mountain. So Behar is on the mountain. So the portion begins in the book of Leviticus, chapter 25. It says, God spoke to Moses, Bahar Sinai, on Mount Sinai, saying. So typically, the Torah portion is named for the first, let's say, significant word in that portion. So the portion begins, V'daber Adonai el Moshe, God spoke to Moses. As you can imagine, that phrase occurs a few times in the Torah. In the Torah. So if you called the portion by one of those words, it would not be significant. So it says, God spoke to Moses, Bahar Sinai, on Mount Sinai, Bahar. So we have 2 Torah portions that we're going to be looking at, Bahar, and then Bechukotai, according to my commandments, in my commandments, however you want to translate that. But okay, so these are the last 2 parshas in the book of Leviticus. Leviticus, not the most exciting book of the Torah. Leviticus in Hebrew is called Vayikra, from its first important word, and he called. But if you think about the word Leviticus we call it English, it comes from the Greek. Leviticus, it sounds like Levite, right?
Mhm.
So
Levite.
Leviticus is sort of, you know, Genesis was the early chapters about the ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, their families. Exodus is about the enslavement, the escape from slavery to freedom. Then we have Leviticus, which we're discussing. Then Numbers is the story of the journey through the wilderness. I love the way my teacher, Dennis Prager, puts it. He says it's called Numbers because of the numbers of complaints, because it's the people traveling through the wilderness. And then Deuteronomy is from the Greek deuteronomos, repetition of the law. That's Moses' valedictory speech on the mountain. Here it is. Here's the summary of my life's work. Leviticus is sort of an incursion into all of that. So it's called Leviticus, Vayikra. It's the priestly code. So the whole book is really a manual for the priests about this sacrifice, that sacrifice, the other sacrifice. We just read last week, you know, how to keep the population safe. I don't know if you happened to see my Devar Torah from last week, but it was absolutely fascinating in the context of this coronavirus situation, because it was all about, well, what if people have these skin afflictions and they have to be socially distanced and checked and double checked and rechecked to make sure that they're safe to come back to the community. So, you know, very, very relevant. But Leviticus, Vayikra, it's more directed towards the priests and not towards the community as a whole. But we have access to this material, and we have these two portions. So the Bahar, the portion that we start with, Leviticus 25, talks about the concept of a sabbatical year and a jubilee year. Anybody have any idea what that is? What's a sabbatical year? What's a jubilee year?
Well, they rested their crops and they could only plant for a certain amount of years, and then they had to let everything rest.
That's exactly right. So we're talking about an agricultural society, and apparently this is a sound farming technique, even though none of us are farmers. But apparently if you keep planting crops over and over and over again, you deplete the soil, and then after a while, your crops do not do as well because you've depleted the nutrients from the crops. So the sabbatical year, from the same root as Sabbath, is every 7 years. So every 7 years, there was a requirement to let the land lie fallow, and you only harvest whatever grows on its own, because, you know, if you've ever had a garden, you know that the flowers, the plants, they extend their seeds. Even if you don't physically plant stuff, stuff will continue to grow. So you just live off whatever grows. And the sabbatical year, it's very much of an act of faith. So it's an exercise in the midah of what does it mean to have faith, to not plan, to not prepare, to just let go and be open to whatever you receive. And then in the 50th year is the Jubilee year. So you have this same cycle of 7 times 7, which, by the way, we're right in the midst of that now with the counting of the Omer, right? We're counting 49 days tonight. We're counting the 21st day of the Omer. And we should do that before we disconnect from each other. We should formally count did I say 29? It was 21st day of the Omer tonight. But then the 50th year is this very, very radical social reorganization, going back to scratch. So the idea of the Jubilee year is that every 50th year, all of the land reverts to its original ownership. So it's a really fascinating concept that prevents the accumulation of wealth in the hands of a small group, so that every 50 years, the land gets redistributed back to whoever the original owner was. So it's an important lesson that the land ultimately doesn't belong to us, it belongs to God. Whatever we own, whatever we have, is a gift from God. And we may be the custodians of it, but every 50 years, we want to ensure that we don't have a situation where we have an incredibly wealthy landed class that has everything and a poor indentured class that has nothing. So you remember when the Israelites were traveling in the desert and came into the land of Canaan, became the land of Israel. Each tribe got its settlement, its area. Each family group got its area. And it was really important that those land ownerships stayed relatively stable. So every 50 years, it's like we take it back down to the foundation. So that's what the Parsha of Bahar is about. And if you look in your reading, there's so much material in there. So I really am hoping that you'll take the time to read through all of that on your own. But starting on page 20, there's a whole section about the mitzvah of caring for the poor that emerges from this section. And then beginning on page 27 are some questions to think about in the context of this parsha. You'll notice also that there is an important mitzvah of not charging interest on loans. Yeah. That if you lend money to another Jew, you are not to charge interest. And it's beautiful to see that there is a Jewish Free Loan Society that continues to exist and function in our own community to this day, where any member of the community can apply for a loan, whether it's to send your kid to camp, to buy something that is essential, you want to have fertility treatments or some medical situation, you can apply to the Jewish Free Loan and get an interest-free loan that is funded by the generous donations of members of the community. So really,
Rabbi?
yes.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
In this system of social justice, how was it appropriate that they owned people? They had slaves, right? And it's hard for me to reconcile a community that was very accepting of slavery and owning human beings when they have all these special rules set aside, but just, of course, for the chosen people.
Right. It's really challenging, Peggy. You're absolutely right. And you would think that people who had just experienced 400 years of slavery, of being slaves, would want to let go of that institution of slavery. And I think it's a really important lesson in how human beings function, in human nature, and how change is affected. So, you know, you're a physical therapist. You've always taken care of your body. You have, you know, a very lovely, trim physique. So I don't know if you've ever had to try, for example, to diet to lose weight. But people who want to lose weight, they'll do these like radical diets and say, I'm never eating this. I'm never eating that. I'm going to forgo whatever it is. And it inevitably doesn't work, because the way human beings affect change is through a slow process, not through a radical leap. So the Israelites were living at a time and in a culture and in a world where slavery was an accepted practice. So if you said to them, okay, we're eliminating slavery, it would be like eliminating carbs, eliminating sugar. It's just completely unrealistic to think that people can affect a radical leap and change. So what happened in the Torah, and then particularly more as it got legislated into rabbinic law in the time of the Talmud, was much more of a gradual change, to the point where the rabbis in the Talmud say, if you acquire a slave, you acquire a master. So for example, the Talmud says, if you have a slave and you only have one pillow, guess what? The slave gets the pillow. And here there's, at least with an Israelite slave, there was a maximum term of 7 years. So in the sabbatical year, in the Jubilee year, and slavery, what we're translating as slavery is mostly what might be understood as indentured servitude. Mostly, how did people become slaves? Because they had a debt and they couldn't pay the debt. And so then they became a slave to work off the debt. You know, not to say that there's not a cruel element about it. I mean, one of the things that grieves me when I look at slavery in the Bible is, so, okay, I'm a male, I become a slave, my master gives me a wife, I have children with that wife, now the sabbatical year comes, and in theory, that wife and children stay, and yeah, I can get my freedom, but my wife and children have to stay. It's definitely not a perfect system, but there's the goal is a progress towards humanizing an essentially inhumane institution.
Okay.
So I'd like you to take a look at that major section in your reading about caring for the poor and all of those mitzvot that are associated that. So that's the parsha of Bahar. And then we move to Bechukotai, which begins with chapter 26, verse 3. So we have Bahar and Bechukotai. Chok is one of the Hebrew words for law. I'm putting this up in the chat. Chukim u mishpatim, sometimes statutes and ordinances. So you see this phrase recurring in the Torah, Chukim u mishpatim. Bechukotai is, my translation that I'm looking at says, if you follow my laws. So you have a chok is a law, and a mishpat is another word for law. So what's the difference? So, I mean, we don't really know, but there's lots of different theories. So some say that a chok is a law that is not intuitive. Like, for example, the Torah, you could think of kashrut, for example, or the Torah says that you shouldn't wear a garment that's made of linen and wool mixed together. It's a law that is not intuitive. If the Torah didn't say that that's a law, you would never know. You would never figure that out. Whereas a mishpat is a law like, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal. Even if the Torah didn't give us that law, we would probably figure out that that's a good way to run a society.
Right.
Some say one refers to positive commandments, one refers to negative commandments. But this parsha, Bechukotai, it starts with the word im, which is really important. Oh, hi, Shelley.
Hi.
You get the kids to bed?
No, they're still awake. They're just downstairs.
How's everybody doing?
Everybody's doing well. Everybody's
Oh,
doing well.
good. It's wonderful to see you. Malka was not able to make it tonight. Her technology.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, okay. So we started a little bit early. So
Okay.
we're talking about the Torah reading, and I'm recording everything that I had, so I'll send it to you after.
Okay. Okay.
So we have a double Torah portion, Bahar and Bechukotai. So we just talked about Bahar, and now we're moving on to Bechukotai. And I see I have a major typo there. I don't know how that happened. Chukim umishpatim. So the portion begins, Im Bechukotai telechu. Im. If you listen to what I tell you, all these great things are going to happen. And the portion has all of these blessings that will flow to us if we listen and do what God tells us. And then a much, 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 much longer and more graphic section of curses. If you don't listen to me, if you don't do what I tell you to do, life is going to be really challenging. So if you look at chapter 26, beginning with verse 3.
Where is that? What page?
I don't have your document in front of me.
It's on the second page, Laura.
Okay.
And the numbers are 26:3. Is that correct?
Okay.
It's kind of on page 10. It's labeled page 10, but for us it was the second page of printing.
Okay. So what are some of the blessings that are going to come? Peace. No wild beasts. 5 of you shall give chase to 100.
That sounds like so much fun. 5 of you will be able to give chase to 100. I love that.
You'll be so strong, you'll be so strong,
Exactly.
so well armed. You'll have lots of kids. You'll eat old grain long stored. I love that, reading that right now in the context of this COVID situation. It's like you'll have so much toilet paper. You'll have 100 rolls of toilet paper. You'll have more than you need. So much stored up. I will be with you. Life will be wonderful. But beginning in verse 14 is all of the curses. What's going to happen if you don't do the right thing? And this goes on for a really long time. And it's really interesting that there are so many more curses and there's so much more graphic and awful than the blessings. And we have 613 commandments, right? Mm-hmm. So of those commandments, we have 365 that are negative commandments, thou shalt not, and 248 positive commandments, thou shalt. So it's kind of parallel to these blessings and curses. It's a lot easier to not do something than to actively do it. And I think it says something about human nature that we're motivated more by fear than by positive reinforcement. I don't know. if you agree or disagree, but that's clearly the Torah perspective, because the blessings are like this and the curses are like this. What do you think, Nina?
No, I would agree. I mean, I don't think we appreciate things until something goes wrong. Like, it's a lot easier to be like, someone gives something to you and you're like, oh, thanks, that's good. But if you lose that thing or something else happens that's worse, then I feel like it's much more of a blow.
More of like a lesson learned, kind of.
Yeah. So it makes sense to you why.
Well, I think it's interesting because when you said it's easier to do things that you're not supposed to do, or the thou shalt nots, sometimes as soon as somebody tells you you shouldn't do it, that means that you want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I think human
Don't
nature
think about elephants, whatever you do, right?
Exactly. It's like, don't tell them that you can't do it, because all of a sudden they'll be plotting for the reason that they can do it. So I thought that was interesting.
So I think the big picture, the big question in this chapter has to do with reward and punishment and what motivates us as human beings. Are we motivated to do the good because we'll be rewarded, or are we motivated to do the good for its own sake? And if we really believe this biblical theology that if you do good, you'll be rewarded, and you do evil and you'll be punished, then what does that say about free will? Can we really be said to have free will if we saw that there was an immediate consequence? If you looked out in the world and saw that the good people flourished and rewarded, and the people who did bad things were punished, then wouldn't we all just do good? And could we even be said to be choosing to do good? Because it's not really a free choice if there's an immediate reward, if the consequences were so obvious.
But some people tend to do just what they want rather than what is apparently a wonderful reward to others. And they go their own way regardless. And they might not choose the best way to behave.
And I guess the real challenge to our faith is we look at those people who make those choices and life is fine and good. So, why should I do good if I see that my neighbor who's, a jerk is doing great?
So I think that there still is free will.
Well,
is what I'm really saying.
One of the things that I'm thinking about as you're talking about this is that it's like are you looking for an intrinsic award or an extrinsic reward? It's like, are you doing good because you just want to do good, or are you doing good because you want something from God back? Or are you just inherently a good person?
Yeah, this chapter is definitely saying, do good, be rewarded, do evil, suffer.
Get punished.
But it sure doesn't work like that in the world.
True.
That's where Judaism and probably other faith traditions introduced the idea of an afterlife, because trying to reconcile, okay, God is all good, all powerful, and all knowing. So if I try to reconcile all of those things, how is it that there are wonderful, pious, good, righteous people who suffer, and there are miserable jerks who flourish? Well, the answer has to be that, in the next life, they'll get their reward and punishment.
But when I read through these materials, it didn't seem like it was do good or do evil. It seemed like it was do what I say, or if you don't do what I say, you're going to be punished. But I didn't really see a clear line that not doing, especially because so much of it had to do with how to be a fair tithe and how to do this and that. I mean, it really didn't seem like the distinction was good and evil. The distinction was obedience or disobedience.
Yes, that's a fair point, Peggy. I think Rachel wanted to say something, and then Nina.
I was going to say exactly that it's about following the rules and the commandments. It's not mitzvah, right? It's doing what I say is the right thing to
Okay.
do.
So I want to hear from Nina, but I also want to clarify that the word mitzvah means a commandment. We use it colloquially as if it means a good deed, but the root tzava is to command. So a mitzvah is a commandment. It's not necessarily a mitzvah. There's a difference between colloquially a mitzvah, a good deed, and a mitzvah is a commandment. Nina.
I think Leviticus sort of gives you the laws straightforward. It does just say kind of God says do this and you follow that, but it's sort of, it reminds me of a TED talk I heard where it's like fake it until you become it. So it's sort of like you have these people that are just out of slavery that are not by any means the most righteous, but if you give them these commandments and if they follow them, then over time will they sort of inherently become good or kind of get better at understanding the values and not just doing them because it's said to do them, but because they also sort of agree with them and feel like those things are good.
Right. So there's a very Jewish idea, like even if you don't feel it, do it, and then eventually you'll feel it. So you see, I put up belonging, behaving, believing. That's the triumvirate. Which comes first?
And Nina, I was going to counter with a TED talk that talked about rule makers and rule breakers. And sometimes the most creative, innovative, and in point of fact, transformative things come from the people who won't just follow the rules they were given, who have to find their own truths and maybe see things a different way. I'm not really arguing with you, Nina. I'm just saying, I'm not sure it's quite black and white. In fact, who was it that was commanded to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? Wasn't he commanded to kill everybody? And the argument was, if I find 20 good people, can I not obey what you're telling me to do? How about if I find 10? I mean, it seems to me sometimes the people who challenged the rules were the people who expressed their free will and actually ended up doing what God was looking for anyway, which was morality, I guess. I don't know.
Right, so we call ourselves the people of Israel, those who struggle with God. So we're not all about just acceptance. I want to make sure we get to look through the rest of our portion. So we're looking at the curses, beginning on verse 17. So you'll suffer from illness. You won't have food. This one in verse 17 is so powerful to me. You'll flee though none pursues. You'll be so unsettled that you won't be able to relax and feel comfortable and secure. You'll be unsettled, running. Nobody's running after you, and yet you'll still be running. It's just so poignant. You won't have enough crops. Look at verse 26. What does it say? 10 women will bake bread in a single oven. So you'll have so little food that everybody won't need their own oven. Everybody will just be using the same oven. And it gets progressively worse as you read through it. In verse 29, it resorts to cannibalism. You'll eat the flesh of your sons and the flesh of your daughters. And if you look, yes, I see Susan's freaking out. And if you look in the book of Lamentations, which is one of the 5 Megillot, one of the 5 scrolls, we read it on Tisha B'Av. It describes the destruction of Jerusalem, and it actually talks about that occurring. Whether there's any historical reality to that or not, we don't really know. But there's a correlation between this text in Leviticus and the text in the book of Lamentations. Finally, as it comes around in verse 39, the whole chapter, the whole text doesn't leave us totally bereft. You will understand the wrong that you've done. You will do teshuvah. God will remember the covenant, and the relationship will continue and be resolved. Chapter 27, I don't think we're going to spend a lot of time on that, although it's very interesting that a Sunday morning Torah study group right now is studying Leviticus 26 and going on to 27. So if you want to know a lot more about your Torah portion, you can tune in 9 to 10:30 on Sunday mornings. Let me know. I'll send you the link, because it's a total coincidence that it happened that way, that we're studying this portion right now. In fact, you know what I'll do when I send you the Zoom link for this conversation tonight? I'll send you the link for that. But chapter 27 talks about different vows, different things that you might pledge to the synagogue or to the sanctuary. And the big takeaway there is, please support the shul. It's important to support the shul. The shul needs your support. And then again, on page 29, you have some more questions for discussion. And on page 31, for each of these portions, there's a midah, a character trait, a soul trait that emerges, and also a mitzvah, a commandment that emerges. So you can please spend some time reading through the Torah portion. Tonight is just intended as the most brief discussion. And one thing I'd like you to be thinking about is, at our Bnai Mitzvah a year from now, one of the opportunities for your participation in the service will be to give a Devar Torah, to talk a little bit about your perspective, your thoughts on any of these themes that we're discussing. So I'd like you to be thinking about, not everybody is going to do that, but if you are intrigued, if you're one of those people who thinks, I'd like to talk at our service about this a little bit, about some idea that might intrigue you, then let me know about that, because we'll start to think about and organize and put together our service outline. So questions, comments?
So when we are studying, like this is an introductory session, are we going to, when we resume in the fall, start going through these portions with kind of more study?
Yes, more in depth. And I really, there's so much material in those pages that you have there. I'd really like you to take some time and read them when you have a little time. We're meeting again next week, and next week was kind of our wrap up Q&A before the end of the formal semester. If Malka needs a little more time to catch up with the Hebrew, that's fine, but I'll jump in with you guys next week also at 7:30. Hopefully she'll have overcome her technical challenges, and she'll, I know, be available over the summer. I mentioned, but I'll mention again that if any 2 or 3 of you want to get together to practice Hebrew or to talk or to look at some of those questions for discussion in the Torah reading over the course of the summer, if you need help to set up a Zoom, let me know, and I can set up a Zoom for you to continue with that. I'm going to work on putting together the syllabus for the fall, and I'll get that to all of you as well.
Very good.
Great.
Sounds like a
All right,
plan.
thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you
Emma.
so much.
And thank you for joining early so we could.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, that's, thank you.
No problem. I appreciate your reaching out. I was just home, so
Good that you were home.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying your meetup of the day.
Oh, thanks,
I
Hillary.
really like those. It's always a good way to center for a
Excellent.
day.
That's a big challenge for me, but I'm enjoying the challenge.
You're doing great. It's really good.
Thank you so much. You're so sweet.
Rabbi, I think you changed the Torah study. It's now from 9:30 to 11, right?
No. Oh, no, not this week, but starting the following week.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, this week. Yeah, so Torah study is normally 9:15 to 10:15. We've been doing 9 to 10:30 with a half-hour schmooze catch-up. And then normally we end at the end of the religious school semester, which is, I think, May 3rd. But under the circumstances, I thought, well, let's continue. We'll get ourselves through Leviticus, all set up for Genesis in the fall. But, personally, I don't love getting up and, being engaged super early in the morning. So thought, well, instead of 9 for the summer, we'll start at 9:30.
Very good.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, all. See you next week.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for everything.
Thanks, Audrey, for keeping us
Bye.
together.
Rachel,
Bye,
get
thank
some
you.
rest.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.
I'll send you the recording.